The air in the courtroom was thick, a suffocating blend of anxiety and the sterile scent of legal documents. I sat there, a monument of forced calm, my knuckles white where I gripped the worn leather of my briefcase. Across from me, Amelia, my wife of 12 years, sat with an almost serene expression. Serene, or perhaps, I thought, with a bitter twist in my gut, arrogant. She had lied effortlessly under oath, painting me as a controlling, unstable husband who had driven her to seek solace elsewhere. Elsewhere meaning the arms of a man she'd met at her yoga studio, a narcissistic pretty boy named Chad, who looked like he belonged in a cologne commercial more than in a real relationship. The divorce proceedings had been a masterclass in manipulation and deception. Amelia, who had always been a creature of carefully constructed facades, had excelled. She had twisted my words, misconstrued my actions, and even presented fabricated text messages that painted me as the villain in this marital drama. Her lawyer, a shark with a designer suit and an oily smile, nodded in agreement with every calculated lie she spun. I, on the other hand, had been quiet, almost passive. I'd let them build their case, secure in the knowledge that I held the ace. My revenge wouldn't be screamed or shouted but delivered with cold, calculated precision. Today was the day my ace would be played. Mr. Henderson, the judge, a woman with piercing eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, called out, her voice cutting through the nervous murmuring in the room. "Do you have any further witnesses to call?" I stood, my gaze meeting Amelia's for a brief moment. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Not fear, not yet, but perhaps a slight unease, a crack in the carefully constructed facade. "Yes, Your Honor, I'd like to call M. Sarah Jensen to the stand." A ripple of confused whispers went through the room. I watched, a grim satisfaction growing inside me, as the door at the back of the courtroom opened. Sarah walked in, her head held high, her dark eyes blazing with a mixture of determination and barely contained fury. She was my sister, a fierce woman who'd always been more loyal to me than to almost anyone. Amelia, upon seeing Sarah, did something that I hadn't anticipated. She gasped, a sharp, audible intake of air that echoed in the silent courtroom. Her carefully crafted serenity shattered, and a look of sheer, naked panic washed over her face. Chad, seated beside her, turned to look at her, a question edged on his smooth features. Sarah took her place on the stand, her eyes never leaving Amelia. The lawyer, his oily smile faltering for the first time, stood to object, but the judge cut him off with a wave of her hand. "Ms. Jensen," I began, my voice calm but firm, "you are aware of the circumstances surrounding my divorce from Amelia Henderson, correct?" "I am," Sarah said, her voice clear and unwavering. "And you were aware that Amelia had claimed I was abusive?" "Absolutely." Her eyes narrowed as she looked at my wife, the silent accusation clear. "And you were, you might say, aware of another party involved? A Mr. Chad Miller?" A slight smirk touched her lips. "Intimately aware. I was also aware of the hotel they'd used for those meetups, and I even have a lovely picture of both of them checking in." She produced a picture from a small envelope and handed it to the judge. A murmur went around the room. The picture was from the lobby camera of the local hotel Amelia frequented. I continued, "Please tell us exactly what you know." Sarah proceeded to calmly dismantle Amelia's fabricated narrative. She testified to the countless hours of phone calls, the secretive texts, and the meticulously documented meetings she'd witnessed between Amelia and Chad. She produced dates, times, even details about specific conversations she had overheard. She spoke of the hotel key cards she'd found in Amelia's purse, receipts for dinners Chad had paid for, and the second cell phone Amelia had used to carry out her affair. Sarah's testimony was a masterclass in exposing lies. It was thorough, precise, and utterly damning. With each revelation, the air in the courtroom grew heavier, the tension palpable. I watched Amelia's face crumble, the carefully constructed facade finally collapsing into a mask of shame and fear. Chad shifted uncomfortably, his color draining from his face. The lawyer looked like he was chewing on lemons, his face contorted in disgust as Sarah finished. Her gaze locked with mine, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. My brother was never abusive. She used him, and she played him, and frankly, she should be ashamed of herself for all the lies she's told. The judge looked at Amelia, who sat still as a statue. "Do you wish to cross-examine Mr. Jensen, Amelia?" Her voice, barely a whisper, shook her head. The battle had gone out of her. The judge looked at me. "Mr. Henderson, it seems that your sister's testimony has provided new evidence of considerable importance. We will need time to examine it. In the meantime, we will recess. Further deliberations will begin after lunch." I nodded, my gaze still locked on Amelia's broken figure. As I left the courtroom, I felt a surge of something that wasn't quite triumph but something close. This wasn't about winning, I knew it was about the truth finally being recognized. The rest of the day was a blur. During lunch, I found myself unable to eat, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins. After court reconvened, the judge announced her verdict with an almost palpable air of disappointment. Not only was the divorce granted, but she awarded me primary custody of our children, citing Amelia's dishonesty under oath and unstable behavior as a danger to their well-being. She awarded me a substantial amount in damages as well. I left the courtroom feeling lighter than I had in months, but the day wasn't over yet. I knew where Chad would be, at the trendy, upscale restaurant he frequented to get his fair share of attention. I made my way there, finding him sitting alone at the bar, nursing a drink. I walked up, my footsteps heavy on the polished floor. "Chad," I said, my voice low and dangerous. He turned, a flicker of recognition and something akin to fear in his eyes. "Henderson," he said, his voice trying to sound casual. "Fancy meeting you here." "I was hoping to meet you," I replied, my eyes narrowing. I didn't waste time with words. I grabbed him by the collar, dragging him from the bar. He struggled, trying to break free, but I was fueled by months of anger and betrayal. I slammed him against the wall, the sound echoing in the suddenly silent restaurant. His face contorted in pain and fear. "You slept with my wife," I said, my voice a low growl. "You destroyed my marriage, and you participated in her lies. You think you're so perfect? You think that stupid face and body is all that matters." Chad tried to speak, to apologize, but I cut him off with a punch to the jaw. He staggered, blood trickling from his lip. I rained blows down on him, not wildly, but with precise, deliberate force. I was aware that people were watching, murmuring, but I didn't care. I had bottled up this rage for so long, and it had finally found its release. It wasn't a pretty fight, not at all, but it was what he deserved. I finally dropped him, gasping for breath, onto the floor. He lay there, a broken caricature of his former self, his designer clothes stained with blood and dirt, his face swollen and bruised. I stood over him, my chest heaving, my gaze full of disgust. "Stay away from me, from my family. You're nothing but a pathetic, lying opportunist, and you will never, ever forget this day." I walked out of the restaurant, leaving him lying there, a shell of the arrogant, self-assured man he thought he was. The world crashed down around Chad that day, and it felt so sweet, so good. I watched his social media blow up with people trashing him and his shallow, artificial life. I watched his world crumble because everyone was finally seeing him for who he was, a leech on society who hurt people. I did it not for my own gratification but to make sure he never hurt anyone again. In the days and weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life, on being a good father to my children, on healing the deep wounds that Amelia had inflicted. I found solace in the love of my family and friends, in their unwavering support. I even found, eventually, a deep sense of peace. Amelia, on the other hand, had to live with the consequences of her actions. She lost her children, her reputation, and she gained the label that everyone would now be aware of, a liar. My revenge wasn't just about winning in court or beating Chad to a pulp. It was about exposing the truth and allowing the consequences to be a natural reaction from everyone. It was about reclaiming my life and finding a way to move forward with my own dignity. And it was, in a way, a very satisfying end to a very dark chapter. I'd won the battle, but more importantly, I'd won my life back.